What's good, gamers? Akalon here, and of course, a welcome back to each and every one of you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would permit me a couple of minutes of your time today to fanboy a little over Iridikron. That's right, you've seen the thumbnail. I'm not going to try and hide the lead here. Play Where's the Dick with Dildo. No, we're going to jump right into this one. The reason I want to do this is fundamentally, I think, we're very good as viewers and as players pointing out all of the failings of Blizzard, and there are always going to be many. That's the whole thing of making a live game, as World of Warcraft is. Sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it isn't, because by the time you have the option of actually testing your game, it's usually too late to really make large sweeping changes. But I also think that it is important to celebrate when Blizzard gets something right. And in this instance, Blizzard absolutely nailed it. When it comes to Iridikron, I would go so far as to say that Iridikron is most likely the greatest villain that Blizzard has made probably in the last decade, maybe with the exception of Denathrius. Maybe with the exception of Denathrius. Denathrius was a very good villain, but I sometimes wonder if Denathrius wasn't as cool as he was because the rest of Shadowlands was as bad as it was, you know? So it's not like Denathrius isn't a really cool villain, more just that in a brilliant expansion, Denathrius would have been just another brilliant addition to that expansion, but in a dog shit expansion, it was like, whoa, what is this light at the end of the tunnel? This light in the darkness giving me a reason in the world to live. Not to mention the fact that much of Denathrius' success comes from his voice actor. Whoever plays that, I'm not too clued in on all the voice actors in World of Warcraft, but whoever plays for Denathrius, maybe you can let me know in the comment section down below who the hell plays Denathrius. But whoever does that is doing a phenomenal job at it. Iridikron, on the other hand, comes from a fairly good expansion. There's been a lot of things wrong with Dragonflight, but overall, I think most of us would agree Dragonflight was good, right? It was an okay, really solid expansion and a solid experience overall. Did it have the high highs from some of the other expansions? No, it didn't. But at the same time, it didn't have the low lows of Shadowlands. So, you win some, you lose some. That's sort of where you want to go with it. But Iridikron, to me, probably one of the greatest villains Blizzard have produced in the last decade. And I would put Iridikron as a villain in the same sort of scope, in the same playfield as Sargeras, as Illidan, back when Illidan was still a villain, as Nalfarian or Deathwing, way back in the day, as the old gods, as it were. Just a phenomenal villain. And I thought I wanted to highlight, firstly, why Iridikron worked so really well, and then also what I think Iridikron may be after. Like, what exactly is going to happen here? So before we get into that, we probably have to cover a little bit of history. Just the history of Iridikron. Not that much, about 20,000 years, so it's really just settle in, it won't take long at all. No, about 20,000 years ago, the incarnates made a very different choice. Back before incarnates and aspect existed, it was protodrakes, and the protodrakes were many. They were, of course, in a battle for their existence versus a creature known only as Galakrond. And Galakrond, we've seen him in the game now. We have some information about him, but let's be real, most about him is still very much a mystery. What we know is that this forced at least 5 protodrakes that would eventually become known as the Aspects to band together to fight Galakrond and ultimately defeat Galakrond. For their efforts, they were awarded as saviors or protectors of Azeroth status. I'm not entirely sure if they knew then what that would entail, but fundamentally they were ordered, as most things are when the Titans touch it. Their power was ordered and also ordained them by the Titans. That's why each of the Dragonflights have a very unique and specific power. That being said, there were those. Now, we always just assumed that all of the proto-drakes accepted that, except for the ones that were sort of ravenous and too stupid. You know, the ones that you see out in the world and that you kill. That was sort of the exception. With Dragonflight, we found out that no, actually not. These proto-drakes that became the aspects weren't the only intelligent proto-drakes. There were others. And these others would eventually become known as the incarnates. You see, they didn't like what the Titans had become. They didn't believe that, or what the aspects had become. They didn't believe that the Titans actually had the best wishes for Azeroth, if you will. They were sort of like, nah, bro, we'll chill. It's fine. They had one request, shall we say, that no proto-drake ever be forced against their will to accept the gift of the Titans. In fact, the incarnates were happy for the aspects to take this power, and they were happy for any dragon that chose the way of order to choose the way of order. And in fact, we're taught that they were still friends. They still shared mating grounds, and they would still raise the clutches together. But then, of course, betrayal happened. The Titans, either known or unknown to Alexstrasza and the other aspects, devised the plan. You see, they would take the waters in the Ruby Life Shrine and infuse those waters with order, much like what Yogg-Saron did in order to create Galakrond, probably where the Titan Keepers got that idea from. They infused it with order, and as these eggs were just chilling there, they were absorbing all of this order, and suddenly dragons were born that looked like dragons and not like proto-dragons. And as you can imagine, the incarnates were livid. They were very angry. Now, the exact notions of how this played out isn't really discussed anywhere, but at some point, these incarnates turned to the elements for their power, and they were given immense power from the elements. Since then, they have fought in order to end the Titan rule on Azeroth, to end the Titan influence on Azeroth. For most of that fight, Raszageth and Veranoth, even Farak to some extent, never wanted to destroy anyone. It was never about the war for them. However, Iridikron, I think, eventually lost his way, eventually lost the actual goal of what they were fighting for. And that wasn't to fight. That wasn't the war. It was to end the Titan influence. He's also the strongest of all of the incarnates, most likely making him stronger than any of the aspects as well. The aspects would need to band together, all 5 of them, in order to stop Iridikron. And right now, Iridikron is in a state of flux. We're not entirely sure what to believe of Iridikron. In the latest cinematic, there is one thing that gives me hope, that Iridikron isn't just going to be, sort of like a throwaway character, because Iridikron says he doesn't trust the Void. He trusts their hunger. Which, if that's true, I don't think people realize the implications of that. Allow me to explain. Now, Therion comes into contact with the old gods, get completely corrupted by them. Farak gets into contact with the old gods. Could we say that he got completely corrupted by them? Probably not. He struggled with their whisper, sure, but he was able to resist it. Sibelian gets hit by Shadowflame and basically falls to corruption almost immediately. Like, it takes a lot to actually bring him back from the brink of complete corruption. Then, of course, there is, I have to mention, Alexstrasza getting hit by the Shadow Bolt and then basically brushing it off as if it's a fucking flesh wound. So, I don't know, whatever that is, the point I'm actually trying to get to, and I'm not saying that this is it, there's nothing in the lore that suggests that this is it, but the fact that Iridikron has been in deals with the Void for as long as he has been, and yet has not been influenced nor contaminated by the Void, that is beyond interesting. How the hell is Iridikron doing that? How is he resisting the void corruption? How is he resisting the void influence? Farak had a seemingly very high tolerance to the void and a seemingly high resistance rating to the void, but he did eventually, sort of go fucking nuts with the void influence. What is it about Iridikron that makes him that strong? And will Blizzard ever think that that's important enough to share? Like, how is he? Remember, he embraced the void more than 20,000 years ago. And while, yes, he was imprisoned within the Titan prison, if you think the Titan prisons stop old gods from spreading their corruption, you've not been paying attention. There's every opportunity or every reason to believe that the old gods would have been able to work with Iridikron even while he was imprisoned within the prison, the Titan prison. And yet, to this day, he has not been corrupted by void. That is interesting. I don't know exactly why that's interesting yet, but that is interesting. And it may actually point to something much larger. But I was very happy that Iridikron wasn't completely just obsessed with the void, but that, the void was just a means to an end. It was a tool that he wanted to use. Of course, Veranoff said, nah, fam, we'll have none of this. You do your thing. I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to be an aspect now. But, of course, not an aspect blessed by Azeroth. And I think Azeroth may have something to do with Iridikron's, let's say it, immunity. It's interesting to me that both incarnate and aspect that turned to the void were Earthwarders. Dragons intimately connected with Azeroth. But all right, that's the history. That brings us to modern day. So what makes Iridikron this incredible aspect, this incredible villain in World of Warcraft? I'm not entirely sure, but the fact that Blizzard has been able to do it twice now suggests it's on purpose. I don't mean to say that I'm not entirely sure what makes him such an incredible villain. I know exactly what makes him that. I'm just not sure if it's on purpose, if that makes sense. I don't know if Blizzard is doing it on purpose, but they've done it twice. And so it leads me to believe that it is on purpose. They know exactly what they're doing. So I'm just not sure why they sometimes miss the mark with some of their other villains. Zuval, what the hell were you doing? But here's the thing with Iridikron. Iridikron is sort of laid up perfectly to be the next mega brain villain for the next decade in World of Warcraft. And it's because he follows an incredibly well-designed villain plotline. Iridikron is revealed to us at the beginning of this expansion. Now think about how often we saw Iridikron do anything. Twice. Really. 3 times if you include the very first time we actually saw them, which was them going into the vaults and into Zaralak Cavern. 3 times we saw Iridikron do anything in this expansion. All of the other methods of driving this expansion was done by Veranoth, Farak, and Razageth. But Iridikron was constantly there. His influence was constantly felt. And now, his final discussion with Veranoth, he says, "You will not see me again until the Titans." So when the Titans arrive, when the Titans' final moments are at hand, that is when you will see me again. If you think about all the greatest villains in World of Warcraft history, you think about the Sargerases, you think about the Guldans, you think about the Void Lords, the Old Gods, even Elune, not a villain, maybe, we don't know, but even Elune, they all follow the same trajectory, the same sort of storyline. Have them in the background, constantly busy, attribute things to them, but don't use them directly. Keep them always just at the back of the player's mind. They're there, but we're just not entirely sure how they're there. Like, how are they exactly connected? We know they're connected. We know they're doing something in here, and maybe here and there might be an item that references to Iridikron, but it's not obvious. It's not in your face. You see, what this does is, over time, this builds up the importance of this character. As the player gets sort of more and more exposure to this villain, its importance grows. And eventually, the character starts looking much like we did at everything going, wait, was that Iridikron? Oh no, that was not Iridikron. Wait, was that what was that? What's going on there? Is that no? Never. No. That's exactly how the player acts. You know, everything becomes Iridikron. Much like everything became Nazoth, and everything became Xalatath, and everything became Sargeras. You can't help yourself because they're there. They're constantly there. They're constantly licking at the outside of your mind, wanting to come in. And that is exactly what Blizzard managed to do with Iridikron here. And I really hope that they continue this. I really want Iridikron to become one of the next big bads. I've always said in World of Warcraft, one of the biggest issues WoW has is a lack of long-term villains. WoW has always had short to medium-term villains, and some of those have been tremendously well done. Some of them have been tremendously badly done. Zuval is a great example of a villain that was supposed to be a tremendously long villain or old villain, but turned out to be an incredibly short and bad villain. And again, that was Blizzard sort of doing everything wrong in creating a villain. But one of the things that's always been a problem to me is Blizzard have always had a very limited arsenal of villains, and it's already starting to look so much better. Sargeras is still out there probably plotting his escape and then vengeance. We know that the demons are up to no good, and they most likely have a new leader. We have Iridikron. We have Xalatath. The Void Lords are still out there. We have Yrel. Yrel, by the way, is another one of those examples. When Yrel finally shows up, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be like, let's do this, bro. It's Yrel, right? Because another great villain right at the edge, just waiting to come in. We have the Light that's waiting to make their move. We have Life that's waiting to make its move. We have Order that's waiting to make its move. There are a lot of pieces now on the board, and I really hope that Blizzard will continue to build these pieces out, because that can only be cool. No matter what you say, no matter what you do, it is always better to have more villains in your back pocket than what it is to have less. We've seen what happened when Sargeras was pretty much the last villain left. It becomes very difficult for players to care because, well, you really don't want to see him end, but then at the same time, you kind of do have to see him end. It's just a nightmare all around. So I wanted to take, this 17, 18 minutes to ask all of you to join me in giving Blizzard a round of applause. So often on this channel, we do point out all the mistakes that Blizzard make. But sometimes it's important to point out when they got something absolutely spot on correct. Blizzard, well done to you. And then, of course, to you, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to keep this channel free from sponsorships, $1 a month over on Patreon gets you there. To all of the patrons, thank you so much for your support. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, be kind to each other, be good to each other, and I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.